Well, it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And like we told you earlier, we will be reflecting deeper this time around on the special interview with the president Thursday night. And seated in the studio here already, gentlemen with whom are going to really look into the aspects and excerpts of that very interview. Let me start by welcoming Femi Adesina, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Also here with us is Dr. Kabir Adamu, a security risk management expert and of course a member of the family. You're welcome, Kabir.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
And we also have here with us regular on Good Morning Nigeria, Jide Ojo, who is a public affairs analyst. Would like to appreciate you for joining us and hoping you're having a warm New Year.
Happy New Year, Claire. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, Nigerians.
And joining us via Zoom joining us from our Benin studio, we have Dr. Osaoro Okonzwa, who is also not a new face on Good Morning Nigeria. We'd like to welcome you, Dr. Okonzwa. Thank you for joining me, joining us, and I hope the new year is doing you good so far.
Thank you, Claire. Happy New Year to you and our friends right there with you in the studio.
All right, so gentlemen, let's explore key areas that the president talked about, critical issues raised from that exclusive interview with NTA's Cyril Stoba. We will begin by taking a look or listening to excerpts on the security situation in the country.
Right, so Mr. President, that easily is one of the biggest challenges in Nigeria today, the threat to security. And it would seem that the more that is put in, the more complex the situation gets. And Nigerians ask, is the government capable of solving this problem before handing over in 2023?
Yes, the government is capable and is going to do it because members of the security, the armed forces and other law enforcement agents, their own security depends on one Nigeria. So no matter when people are selfish, it's their self first. So even for their own selves, they better stabilize Nigeria, and I believe they will do it. I know we are short of resources. For example, dealing with the militants, if people bother to reflect on how we found the northeast and south and how much progress we have made, and acquiring helicopters, aircraft, their maintenance, their ammunition, armored cars, to counter effectively the bandits. They cost money and they cost time for training and adaptation.
All right, that was the question on security situation. But please just let's keep that on hold and then begin by analyzing, the ambience, the atmosphere, and the comportment of that interview. And I'd like to start off with Mr. Femi Adesina.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and I say Happy New Year to you and to Nigerians. Yes, this interview, I would say, was calm and measured. And I mentioned it immediately to Cyril Stoba after. I had never even seen the president so much relaxed with the media. The president is somebody who is on his guard when the media is there. While with Cyril Stoba, he was quite relaxed, and you see that the interview just, there was a flow, and everything was conversational. And there was no antagonism. It went well. And when an interview is like that, you get more from the person you're interviewing.
Jide Ojo, what did you take out of the interview? I see Lisa talking about the scenario, the comportment, the composure of the president especially, and of course the interviewee.
Well, the president has always been a very comported person. He's not somebody that is aggressive, even in the face of storm. He's always a very calm person. So his comportment is nothing unusual. I watched the channels as well as the NTA. I think the president did himself good by talking to Nigerians about where things are, the concerns many Nigerians have, about issue of politics, infrastructure, security, COVID-19. And, when I watched a series yesterday, the president talking about, we are working on COVID-19 vaccine, but we don't want to say, we don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet. It tells you of somebody, and I see the president very articulate. He was not agitated. He was not somebody scrambling for what to say. He was speaking from the mind. So I think that's very presidential. Nigerians can disagree with some of his submissions. That's normal, like the issue of state police. Not many Nigerians will want to agree with him. Issue of successor. I've read PDP jumping at him saying he should not talk about any successor. But that's politics. I mean, it's also allowed in a democracy. But on the whole, I think the president did well.
Dr. Kabir.
Yeah, thank you. For me, the fact that one of the criticisms that a lot of, especially from the opposition, have leveled at Mr. President, that he speaks more to foreign media than local media. I think from the beginning of the year to now, the fact that Mr. President has first of issued a New Year speech and then granted interview to two local media stations. I think it's a very good way to begin the year in terms of the president's, attempt to reach out to Nigerians and give Nigerians something to think about for the rest of the year. And we're hoping that, the president and his media team will build upon that. It's an election year. There is a lot of trepidation among certain persons within Nigeria. And so that type of reassurance and speech, I think, from the president will go a long way towards giving Nigerians a sense of what direction Mr. President. So on the whole, I think it's a very good development.
Dr. Kabir, keeping tap on that, and let's insist on you a little bit for a while, looking at the excerpt we first had. Let's look at the security situation as being put forward by the president in the interview. And then when we look back to 2015 through this time around, we can see the improvements made. But nonetheless, there are still complaints all over. The menace is all over the place still, even though the assurances given by the president are still very cogent and heavy, has given us more hope that at least in the coming months there's going to be great improvement. What should the Nigerian government be doing differently in this regard?
In a general overview of the president's speech, in today's world, in 2022 as it were, what the world talks about is human security. And so when I talk security, I usually would not just want to look at the physical security. I know in the concluding remarks of Mr. President, he talks about the acquisition of assets. And it's remarkable because, frankly, I don't think in the last, especially in the Fourth Republic, we've had any government, any administration that has invested in assets, both for the military as well as the other 24 ministries, departments, and agencies in security like the Buhari administration. And so that's remarkable. That physical component of security where you try to contain the security challenges is very important. But beyond that, the soft approach to security, tackling unemployment, putting in place social investment programs, addressing the issue of poverty, attempting to address the weapons proliferation in the country, improving the delivery of justice, the administration of criminal justice, addressing social grievances. All of those things, to an extent, Mr. President has touched in the speech. And for me, those are the important things. But going forward, what do I hope to see? Three things in particular.
Just Dr. Kabir, just before you give us your hopes and your expectations, let's also escalate that conversation. But I want to just put a hold on the issue of security. My question is to Mr. Femi Adesina. Dr. Kabiru mentioned two things in his response to the first, to the ambience and atmosphere surrounding the conduct of that interview. And he talked about insinuations that, Mr. President's preference is for foreign media interviews, and of course the form of communication and all that. I'd like for you to speak to that, and why again was the interview restricted to just some media houses?
Thank you. If I start from the second one, why was it restricted to some media houses? The intention is for Mr. President to speak to the country, and the two media houses chosen for this particular interview have accomplished the purpose. It was not a democratization of media appearances. It was just, the intention was just to communicate. And by the time you choose NTA, which is like the largest network in the country, and you have chosen channels, which is also widely watched, the message has been passed. I'm sure if we did more than those two for now, information overflow will also come again. And the two are just adequate. The last outing we had, it was Arise TV and NTA. So anytime we make these appearances and interventions in the polity, most likely it will be two stations.
So why does the president, not grant interviews? You said whenever he sees the media, he's always on his guard. Yes. Why is that so?
The president also has a history with the media. He has a history with the media. And when we talk, most times he still refers to it. And when I insist on certain things, he says, you are one of them. You are one. That's why you're on their side. That's why you're on their side. But then, as often as we can get him to do this, I'll say he will do it. And he will do more of this as the government winds down. But there's still one part of your question. Yeah. Why does he prefer to talk to foreign media? That's not quite true. It's not quite true. It has not been true in the past 4 years, for instance. Yes, in the beginning of the administration, whenever we traveled, we always would insist that we should talk to the media. But it was not just foreign media. Any trip, you had NTA there. You had some other local media there. So when he grants interviews, these people are also there. The fact that he grants it on foreign soil could be an issue. Yeah. But that is when we have more time, it's more relaxed. And so each time we went out, we would tell him, let's try and talk to the media. And he would do until noise came that he was always talking to media outside the country. So we had to stop that again. And that was a window shot. Yeah? Where he talks, I believe, does not matter. Because even if he talks to foreign media, the world is a global village now. Anything he says comes back to Nigeria. And when he speaks, even outside, local media are there. NTA is on every trip. Apart from NTA, there are 2 other media houses we take along. They are always part of those interviews.
Okay. Nadabo.
Okay. Let's move over to Benin and then get the feel of, the feeling of Dr. Osaoru Okunzua, who is a public affairs analyst. The president spoke yesterday and the day before yesterday on Charles and, of course, on NTA. Our concern this morning is looking at issues in this interview. What's your general take on the whole interview now before we get down to the specifics?
On a general note, I think celebration of democracy, because I don't think that setting will have happened this time in 1984. And it's also a kind of applause for the president that he's conforming to the details of democracy, talking to the nation directly without equivocation. I really don't think most of the issue he raised are subject to further analysis. They were clear enough, and I don't think they can easily be misunderstood. You could either agree or disagree with him. I think to that extent, our democracy is thriving, and I see that outing as an endorsement of it still.
Let's move on to, the earlier aspect we talked about, talking about the excerpt, especially the one on security, which Dr. Kabir Adam, started talking about. Let's look at it from the point of view of the current situation, and indeed what exactly the government has in stock for us and for all Nigerians in relation to keeping this country safe, the properties and people of this country. Femi Adesina, tell us, the president is very, very much optimistic about bequeathing to Nigerians a better secured country by the time he lives in the next 17 months. And it's still not yet, as good as he may think from the outside, because people in these areas are really feeling the pinch and feeling the pain as it moves on. What informs that optimism?
Yes, there is cause for optimism, really, because you need to compare what had been with what is. As bad as what is, you still can't compare it with what used to be. The things were a lot worse in Nigeria security-wise than now. Even in the recent times, as far back as 2-3 months ago, things were quite very bad. But if you look at the past 4-6 weeks, you know that there is a difference. And things are poised to get better. For instance, the bandits who are troubling the Northwest and infiltrating into North Central have now been declared terrorists. That means that certain kind of armaments can be deployed against them, which was not the case before. By the time that is launched against them, you will see what will happen. Northeast is fairly under control. There are still what I would call atavistic attacks from time to time. But it didn't used to be so. There was a time that it was a daily affair, hourly affair. Compare then and now. There is a big, big difference. And that has happened. Northeast is virtually stabilized, not completely done, but fairly stabilized. Northwest will come under control. The control is becoming evident. Earlier this week, you see that 2 major troublers of that region have been taken out. And by the time you take out all those elements, you see that peace will return to the country. It doesn't take 17 months to do it. It can even be done before that. You just need to be privy to what happens in the Security Council meetings. The president referred to it. If you know what happens in the Security Council meetings, you will know that this thing will be ended.
Yeah, he has been saying that. He says they spend not less than 4 hours most of the time when they meet, these security chiefs. And given the strength of his military background too, so he's in the know of it.
We will speak to that in the course of our conversation, the hours that the president says he puts into administering the Nigerian project. But again, Kabiru and Jude are here in the studio, so we have the pleasure, proximity of reaching out to them whenever we want. So please, I beg to allow me to go to Benin studio to ask Dr. Okonzua my next question. And that's because you said that the issues raised by Mr. President, or Mr. President's response to the issues put to him may not need further, analysis. But from his response of the security situation, I'd like for you to tell us, or to probably analyze the mood transition and what message that is conveying to Nigerians about the president's feeling, about the security situation. If you watch from the outset, when Cyril started his questioning, the president was very relaxed. I mean, you could see him even smiling. And then the questions, moved on to, the issues of security and the performance of his administration, and the mood changed.
Well, yes. I did say what he said yesterday, we don't need further analysis because they were very simple and straightforward. And it's credit to him that he spoke straight to his countrymen, even as our president. And with his background as a general of the Nigerian army, a former head of state himself, I think the whole essence was to inspire confidence in all of us, his countrymen. And I think he succeeded in doing that. A kind of progress report by talking to the two media houses, the NTA and channels, of vital national issues. We are happy he's giving a progress report that tells us the situation in the country is under control. But just like Dr. Kabiru had said, security is not about armamentarium alone. The concept of human security will need to be fully embraced in our country as we pursue the welfare of our citizens. And it's not only the kind of situation we are now, it's not only our armed forces we actually need. We probably will need our diplomats too to turn inwards. We need to actually find out the root causes of these conflicts across the country. So deeper issues need to be dug into so that we can promote a kind of serviceable dialogue about how to move our nation forward, even as we continue the national building project. So the president did well by talking to us. I commend him for that as a citizen of this country. And we want to see a situation where succor is brought to our countrymen, our compatriots in the Northeast, in the Northwest, and so on. And security and sense of belonging across the country, all the issues that are bringing about this insecurity, we need to get to the bottom of them. So as I said a while ago, not only our soldiers, our airmen, and our seamen, we also need our diplomats to help us internally.
And coming back to the studio, just before we take our next excerpt, Jude, his response to events in the Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, and even the NSAS showed a president that's so frustrated by the fact that Nigerians are not appreciating, the efforts put in to really address the situation. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what it is. And uneasy lies here that wears the crown. I don't envy Mr. President. Sometimes I ask myself, why do people go into political offices? Because I, as a private citizen, I enjoy more peace than Mr. President. I really don't envy him. Because whatever he does, it's like a judgment. There will be those who will bash him, there will be those who will laud him. And that is, he asked for the job. It wasn't a coronation. So the fact that he asked for the job comes with both the asset and liability of being in government. Even Mr. Adesina, I don't envy him. He knows we have had personal discussion around this issue. But truth be told, you see, we don't appreciate our leaders until they leave office. And then you see clearer. The president is a father, is a husband, is a Nigerian. He lives in Nigeria. He's not a diplomat that comes in during Christmas and New Year. He is pained by those deaths. And what further frustration can you have that your own home state is even almost ungovernable? So he's pained, but we don't see that pain because he talks less. He's not a talkative like me. I know I talk a lot. But Mr. President is very measured in his comment. So he wants his action to talk for him. And a tree does not make a forest. The question is, does his lieutenants even believe in his vision? That's another thing. He won't go. I heard the Ethiopian Prime Minister wanted to... Did he lead the forces against the Tigrans? You don't expect a president to go to lead, even though he's commander-in-chief of the armed forces, to now lead the battle against the bandits. The issue is naturally and normally, even if I were to be the president, I would feel frustrated because the casualty figures that is being churned out on a daily basis is not friendly. And all his investments, diplomacy, all the foreign trips he has gone to convince foreign direct investors to come and invest in Nigeria will come to naught if there is no political and physical stability in the country. And that's what has also affected food security. So the man is doing so much, but maybe fifth columnist, maybe at some point he feels that the situation is overwhelming. He will not admit that because as a soldier, you don't celebrate failure. You have to be a man and you have to be stoically, you have to be equanimous about everything. But the bottom line is that my own take is this issue of security, whether you talk about managing IPOB in Southeast, the NSAS protests in the Southwest, the banditry in the North, the elders farmers clashes in North Central and all of that, they come as a result of global challenges, like issue of climate change. It doesn't have control over that. Mm-hmm. Issue of COVID-19. You may think it's just and Dr. Okonzo was talking about looking at the root cause. We all know the root causes. There have been so many researches about the impact of climate change on insecurity, the impact of COVID-19, the job losses that have come. The president is trying, through social investment program, trying to get people to work, talking about agric revolution, money through anchor borrowers program. But now, the bandits are not allowing the farmers to get to the farm, or they are demanding for access fee and harvest fee. That is frustrating because what you have your vision carved out, you know where you want to take the country to, but maybe the situation, the unenvisaged situation, is not helping him, and it will need more than planning. It will also need prayers. It will also need coordination. What I advise at all times, I have opportunity to speak on issue of security, which I've also commented on in my column in The Punch, is that there is need for better coordination among the three tiers of government, because the federal government is pulling its weight, it's doing its bit, is acquiring assets. These assets are going to be deployed at community levels. So if the communities are not receptive and not supportive, the issue of whistleblower protection law, it's something that is needed like yesterday, so that even when people volunteer information to help the military, their lives are not endangered. They are protected. So it's a wide, convoluted, complex dynamics that we are dealing with. But like I said, I pray for Mr. President's success in this, because whatever he does after May 29, it will not be judged by the infrastructure. It will be about the security of the country.
On a final note, thank you so much, Jide. Kabir, give us your final take on this issue the president talked about. We have the farmer harvest clash. The season is around here. We have the issues of the state police, and of course trying to secure some areas, and some issues relating to the security which Nigerians are expecting the government to do something differently about.
Thank you. And incidentally, Mr. President has roughly just a year and a few months to do this. So I would like to ride on the concluding remarks of Mr. Jide when he talked about coordination at the federal, state, and local government levels. Everything that the administration does, if they are not reflected at those levels, then frankly, we are not likely to see any major changes. And the amazing thing is that there are beautiful policies. As an example, there is the revised national security strategy. There is no part of the world, even in the US, if you pick that document and expose it to a country like the US, they will commend you. Amazing document, but where are we in terms of its implementation? So I'm hoping that when Mr. President said that he meets, with his security team and they spent 4 hours part of what they will start doing is to review the level of implementation of some of these amazing policies that I've mentioned, such as the revised National Security Strategy 2019, the National Defense Policy, the Counter-Terrorism Strategy, NACTES 2016. Name them, they're all there. How are we faring in terms of its implementation? I can tell you, as someone who is in that space, that we can do better in terms of our implementation. Second point is the, for lack of a better word, impunity within the security space. Just yesterday, the Defense Headquarters gave out some data in terms of successes that it has achieved. About 24,000 plus of members of both Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah al-Dawati wal-Jihad and the Islamic State in West Africa province that have surrendered. It has killed about 950 terrorists. Name them. Successes like that. So what kind of metrics do we have within our security space that allows monitoring and evaluation? Again, another thing that I'm hoping that during the council meetings, they are able to use metrics so that we can see in clear terms who has done well and who hasn't done well. We can sit here and discuss for the next 24 hours, but if you don't have metrics to measure performance, then it will be difficult, really, this first point I made around impunity. And then I run a consultancy, and I know, for instance, just like Mr. Femi mentioned, that in the last 2 months, there have been successes. I can tell you that if we use starting from June, the number of fatalities that we had in the country was about 1,000 plus for the month of June. But by November, we had gone down to 400. And by December, it's about 290, 93 thereabout. So clearly, there has been improvement. But unfortunately, and that worries me, that improvement is not being communicated to Nigerians. Rather, the narrative is the opposite. A lot of things have happened in the early weeks of December. A former governor in one of the Northwest states came out and said some things that were quite unpalatable. So again, metrics is very important, and tied to that metrics is the need to take action against failure, as it were, especially within the security space. So I'm hoping that these three things will be part of what would be done within the next 1 year plus, so that the security architecture is strengthened with some of these new development.
Sorry, Nadabo, just before you take the next excerpt, I'd just like to add, gentlemen, that the president, in responding to the issue on security, the president, of course, made reference to the number of local governments reclaimed from the bandits in the northeast, and of course the quietness prevailing at the moment in the northwest, north central, and he asked Nigerians to judge his administration fairly based on, of course, events happening in those areas and also in the south where we were and where we are at the moment. I think those are some key points that we should to your
indeed, really clear. And let's now look at another aspect of the the president's interview with Cyrus Toba on the NTA. There is no doubt that the president is a champion of corruption, and indeed he has been that all the while, internationally one must say, and that is where he is coming from. And whenever he said at the beginning, around 2015, when he assumed office, that if Nigerians don't kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria, and has been moving consistently in that regard. In the interview, he specifically said that people must live within their means. That's a direct cut. To get more of that, let's listen to him once again so that we can now have time to look at it.
Problem of corruption is a continuous one for a developing country like Nigeria. People have to accept living within their means. As long as people try to live outside their means, so long as corruption will be with us. And the best way is firmness by departments, by ministries, and especially by states. Now look at the local governments. The local government in this country, the third tier of government, are getting less and less effective And they are supposed to be the most effective because they deal with from the bottom upwards, especially in terms of education, healthcare, which is the basic things for the majority of Nigerians. Educating the people or the children, and the healthcare for families and so on. So Nigerians must conserve resources to effectively give education and healthcare to the needy.
I had wanted to start off with Jideojo, but you please give me a break. Let me move on to let me because I've read much about that in your column. So let me move on to Benin and then hear from our guest there. What's your take of the president's, statement, most especially when he said people should live within their means, and of course referring to local governments as becoming less and less effective, in which case it is where they are supposed to be more effective than we think they are at the moment?
The means test has always been a way of gauging corruption all over the world. If a person is on a salary of 100,000 naira, for instance, and his consumption is in excess of 500,000, even members of his neighborhood will ordinarily take notes. But it goes beyond that. It comes to this issue of law enforcement, it comes to the issue of impunity, it comes to the issue of immunity, and so on. And for a country like ours, it is actually possible to develop a peculiar accounting or auditing system that will address us. So we don't have to keep practicing what is not working for us. We need to be very fundamental. We need to really study what makes corruption thrive. It's not just because people want to. Of course, people would like to live beyond their means if they're not disciplined. But what are the checks and the balance? If any person is caught cheating, stealing, whatever means of corruption, how speedily will it be tried and punished? So those are the issues. I think we have the architecture already. We just need to get on with them. We have institutions, ICPC, EFCC, the police force, all of them. We need to make sure they have the resources to do their work, and we need to create the atmosphere where nobody is protected. So just like I am a Benin man, if a Benin man is found to be corrupt, my sympathy should not go to him. My sympathy should go to the country as a whole. My sympathy should actually flow towards the common good, to say corruption is a kind of worm that is going to eat the system hollow. Therefore, whether the person is my brother or my kinsman should not matter, so long as the person is tried fairly and punished according to the laws of the land. So we need to open up our system, redesign our accounting system, our auditing system, to make sure things are more transparent and so on and so forth. I think that was going to be the way to go. It is good that the president still acknowledges the problem of corruption, but we need to tackle the problem scientifically, drawing again on all our elements of national power. I really don't think we should throw up our hands in despair about it. Corruption can be tackled.
Dr. Okonzua, thank you for your response. Let's come back to the studio and throw the question at I'm giving you doctor now. Mr. Femi Adesina. Now, one area where the public, raised concern in the president's anti-corruption fight is not in loot recovery. He has, he scored high, but in what is alleged to be selective profiling of, oppositions. And in Mr. Stober's question about opposition, politicians, jumping boats into the APC, or the politicians who are either have been accused of corruption or corrupt practices, jumping boats into the APC. What will be the fate of those kind of politicians? The president's response was, no one will go scot-free. Is that definitive? Is it the direct message coming from the president?
And I think that's the situation. You know, in our country, it is so very easy to allege. Very easy. And people turn allegations to definitive and conclusive positions. They will say, oh, he had a case, he went into APC, the case died. And I ask them, point at one person. Just one, not two, not three. Point at one person who had a case and came into APC and that case died. They can't point it out. Just like Mr. President said, no one who has a case to answer will escape. All those who had cases before they came into APC, their cases continue. Their cases continue. It's just a matter of that we expect our judiciary to be able to dispense with these things more expeditiously. But with this president, corruption is something it doesn't brook at all. In fact, the easiest way to fall out of favor with this president is for you to be tarred with the brush of corruption, and you are out. So it's what he said is just the position.
Dr. Kabir Adamu, what's your opinion?
Again, let's remember that tackling corruption is one of the pivotal issues that this administration is running on. There were three: insecurity, fighting corruption, and then diversification of the economy. So it's only fair that the president emphasized his role on anti-corruption in the interview. Now, I would like to write on everything that my co-discussants have mentioned and emphasize 2 points. One of them is the need to be more proactive than reactive. Part of the reason why, when you ask the question to Mr. Femi about the accusation that it's the opposition that are being, targeted in the anti-corruption campaign by the EFCC and to an extent the ICPC, part of the reason is because to an extent we're being reactive. I know a lot of policies have been put in place, but one area that I think we can strengthen the anti-corruption campaign is to look at the civil service in particular. What kind of measures do we put in place to prevent corruption? I learned this from the Europeans. They say trust is good, but control is better. So what kind of control measures do we put in place? When we opened the single treasury account where people are supposed to pay money into, it's an attempt. But how much of implementation of that policy are we? What stage of that are we? So again, let's be proactive as against being reactive so that we prevent the corruption in its first place. Number two, Asian countries have that. When Mr. President advised that we live within our means, as far as I know, none of the law enforcement agencies that we have, including the anti-corruption ones, can look at a property and ask who is the owner and then begin an investigation. So usually it is based on the whistleblower policy, somebody mentions it. But like I said, Asian countries have that. If you are a civil servant and your salary is, let's say, 200,000, and then you own a property that is worth billions of naira, there should be that provision within our laws that allowed the security agencies to question how you got that money. Let the onus of proof be on you, as against the current situation where the onus is on them to prove that you were wrong. Second point is the prosecutory aspect, where we are aware that there are corruption cases in the country, that some of them have lasted up to almost 20 years that are yet to be concluded. That's not acceptable. The deterrence element within our criminal justice system that should allow speedy prosecution of certain cases. So I think the judicial arm of government needs to look closely at that. How do they speed up the prosecution of certain cases that involve corruption, so that deterrence element. And the last point is our value system. Currently, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, not many people, shun or are against corruption. What people really matter is the money, how you got the money. Value system, unfortunately, has metamorphosed from, frowning at how to now accepting the fact that people have money. And I can give you instances, several examples of where people got illicit money, got rich through fraudulent means, and they're being celebrated. That's the failure of our value system. So again, beyond the law, we also need to go back to our value system. Look at the family unit, look at the religious institutions, look at our schools, and then lastly, the media. How do we, put forward and celebrate, success, hard work, all those value elements that made us what we were before. We need to revamp that so that young people coming up understand that when you try to, be successful, it's not just about being successful in the bad way. Being successful has to be in the good way.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Lastly, on this issue of corruption, Jide Ojo. Okay. The discourse is never exhaustive. Let's hear your views. Talking about most especially deterrence, impunity, speedy disposition of justice, and all this aiming towards bringing down corruption to the barest minimum.
Nadabo, I thank you that you've read some of my opinions on this, and I will just summarize them. This administration, I laud them for anti-corruption measures, and you could see the infusion of technology in the fight against corruption, IPPIS, the BVN, the TSA, and all of that. But these are human elements, it's operated by human elements. If what we read in the papers about yesterday, EFCC came out to say it has secured 2,200 convictions in just 1 year, which is unprecedented. According to them, the last time they got close to something like that was in 2019 when they got about 1,800 convictions. So 2,200 and they lost about 34 is something worthy of celebration. But would this improve our rating on Corruption Perception Index? The answer is no. And you know why? Because while we focus more on grant corruption, we look less on retail corruption, in which many of us are involved. The artisans, the businessmen, everybody cutting corners. There was a trendy video, I don't know, Claire, whether you saw it, somebody measuring grain. And he was putting some in his pocket. Yeah. And the guy that was measuring grain asked him to look at something over there, and in the course of time, it reduced the measure that he was putting in the polythene for him. So, two of a kind. Everybody is in the game. So retail corruption is very pervasive among market men and women, but we don't see it as corruption. We see those who steal billions are the corrupt people. And the definition of corruption, it goes even beyond money. So how much education are we giving? I think like NTA took up the issue of rape with Star. It's something you can also do, public education or, discuss this with retail corruption is very, very endemic. Very, very endemic.
But corruption can also be fought at different levels.
I'm sure.
At the retail level, there are those that should be fighting that corruption.
No, I'm only saying that NTA can also take it up. There are several other institutions fighting rape, but you chose to also weigh in on that. And I'm saying that, for that perception to diminish, for us to significantly improve on Corruption Perception Index, a lot needs to be done. Kabiru says something which is very instructive. The issue of value system. I've asked myself, even if it's among those who are already convicted, why do we still allow them to go with their national honors? Why can't we strip them of those honorary doctorate they got, or the chieftaincy title they got, or the national merit they get? Strip them of it so that people will know that even when you serve the term, you will still be without honor. I recall there was the former GOC in Sokoto who was General Otike, who was court-martialed and found to have been, was indicted by the court-martial, and he was demoted from Major General to Brigadier General and dismissed with ignominy. So whatever honors you get, I think by the time people start stripping you of your, maybe you are a pastor in a church, they strip you of your pastoral duty. You are a chief in a community, they strip you of that. It will send a message. You are excommunicated. You are denied Holy Communion.
Basically, the naming and the shaming thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one. Two, we also need to improve our legal regime at fighting corruption. Issue of whistleblower protection, for instance. It's been there in the National Assembly. How much? Can the president talk to the leadership of National Assembly and say, I need these 3-4 anti-corruption laws to be passed before June? It's not dictating to them. It's been there. Like the whistleblower protection law, the audit law. Did you know, Nadabo and Claire, that we are still using audit law of 1956?
God.
Which is pre-colonial.
Mr.
So
Jide,
we need to improve on that. Look at the Auditor General's report on the civil service. 4.9 trillion not evidenced in the no receipt and all of that. And they just send it to the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly. And that's where it lies.
Let's hear the perspective of Dr. Okonzua. Dr. Okonzua, I'm wondering if Mr. President's response to that question resonates with you, or if you feel there would have been other things that his administration could have done to give the fight against anti-corruption more or greater credibility.
The president seems to be wary of his military past. He wants to be a Democrat and he wants to align. Otherwise, I think even the judiciary should have been involved in it, special courts and so on and so forth. If corruption is deemed a national problem or a national emergency, then maybe extraordinary measures without prejudice to the rule of law ought to be installed all the while. Of course, TSA, BVN, all those things are there. Other forms of technology. A while ago, I talked about even overhauling our accounting, our auditing system. And being who we are in Nigeria, there must be an accounting or auditing system that will fit us, that will make us really, really transparent in whatever we are doing. And of course, we also have to say this too. Corruption has a lot of causes. We also need to study them, all these causes, because desperation can bring about corruption and so on. People can also have genuine needs. They can have a gap between their income, not in terms of luxury now, real need, between their income and what they actually need for survival. So in terms of retail corruption and all that, some of those things can be explained on that basis. But all the same, we need to create a culture where corruption is forbidden. In fact, a foreign writer, John Campbell, we may not terribly like him in Nigeria, has made comments on this, that in Nigeria, apart from the nature of our politics, corruption has become a culture that victimizes people and people are in turn victimized. So we need to address the issue of corruption head on. Special courts, special auditing system, accounting system, deployment of technology, whatever we work, so long as nobody is victimized, so long as people are giving fair trial when they are accused and so on. And of course, we handle corruption cases with dispatch. I think the solution will be in the doing. We need to be committed to it and advance all the measures.
So much, Dr. Okonzua. I think we should be done now with the corruption issue. Let's look at another aspect. One sore point, or so in quotes at least, of the budget or the Appropriation Act 2022 is, the president's reservations about certain aspects, which didn't really stop him from at least signing it on the 31st day of December. That's to maintain the, budget cycle of January to December, and that was a good thing. But he spoke further on this. Let's take a listen.
Mr. President, let's come to the 2022 budget, which you have signed into law. The figure that was returned to you by the National Assembly was higher than what you proposed. First part of my question is, it's seen as if this is going to cause some disagreement between the executive and the National Assembly, the legislature, for having increased what you sent to them.
Well, luckily for us, when you say us, I say this government, we have, our party has a majority in both houses, both Senate and House of Representatives. I think it's understandable that committee leaders, at least, they insist that their constituency must see them to be effective by taking a project to them at whoever's expense. But we looked at the thing globally, Nigerian project. For example, we are trying to get the infrastructure, the roads, the rail, power. Now, if we move a lot of resources towards, it will be certainly at the expense of some maybe village road or something, where people will go to the marketplace and so on. But what bothers them is their own immediate request, not at the national level. So it is the government's problem to try and strike a balance between its infrastructural priorities and some constituencies.
That was an excerpt of President Muhammadu Buhari's response to a question on the budget and, of course, the parts or the role played by the legislators. When we come back from this short break, we'll take the views of our guests right here in the studio and from our Bini Network Center.
The Nigerian aviation sector is rapidly growing with the construction of new international airport terminals in several regions of the country. The new Murtala Mohammed International Airport has an estimated passenger increase of 30 million annually and 15 million for Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. Malam Aminu Kano International Airport is also expected to open new frontiers for the region with more travel capacity for the annual Hajj, while the new Akanu Ibiam International Airport, Enugu, avails more business opportunities connecting the industrial cities in the region to the world. These new terminals beat world-class standards with enabling infrastructure that aid air travel, tourism, and the eventual growth of the country's GDP.
Open up commerce and, of course, link us to international societies.
People from international community will come here to do business, and then that will bring in more revenue to the state.
Now, distances can be seamlessly covered as Nigeria keeps raising its bar to suit global infrastructure standards.
The NOA, for example, has succeeded a great deal in sensitization during the pandemic, and we have found the community mobilization officers most effective in the sensitization and in the advocacy campaigns, creating awareness on the coronavirus pandemic. We have done this through the production of jingles, which were very widely distributed in different languages, in English, in Hausa, in Yoruba, in Igbo, in Tiv, in Igala, in Kanuri, in Fulfulde, in Ijo, in Isoko, in Bini, in talk of any other language you can think of. We had translated sensitization messages.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
African Cup of Nations starts on the 9th of January 2022 on NTA, powered by AfroSports. For sponsorship and advertisements, contact us on 090-9890-6913 or 090-3513-2838.
The Council of Our Fathers.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Oh, well, gentlemen, welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. And of course, we're just looking at issues in the president's interview with Cyril Stroba yesterday on the NTA. We just had an excerpt on the budget, his views on the budget, and then what really he meant by saying that government will strike a balance between critical constituency projects, critical infrastructure projects, and then constituency projects, talking about some insertions that were made into the budget before he signed it and said democracy, or rather the signing and the budget itself, is a work in progress. Where do I start from? Jide, can you give us briefly your own assessment?
I mean, Mr. President just played smart like he did on Petroleum Industry Act in signing the budget, and that's diplomacy. Because if it were to be in previous administration, he will have thrown it back at them, and maybe by June, we will not have 2022 budget. But he tried to, salvage the situation. He didn't want to rock the boat. We have returned to January to December financial year. So the best thing is, let me sign and express my concern formally to the National Assembly. I hope the National Assembly will reciprocate the President's kind gesture by signing. And so when they resume, one of the top priorities they will deal with is the amendment that the President said he will be seeking. Because it doesn't make any sense to have an unimplementable budget. I mean, we all know that there is revenue shortfall. The Minister of Finance said the revenue projection for 2022 is about 10 trillion. And we have a budget of 17 trillion. So where will you get the balance of 7 trillion? And we are the one complaining that the President is borrowing too much. I think Shewa Kimbaloye asked that question about the snowballing borrowing, which some of us have expressed concern, and which people are even cynically saying they hope the Chinese doesn't come and take over our national asset at some point in future. So the National Assembly should have worked.
The Minister of Finance has also said that we are on a reasonable threshold.
Yes, compared to our
GDP.
No, I'm not dwelling on the borrowing. Okay. I'm only saying that given the fact that we are running a deficit budget, like Professor Isesage said, the National Assembly can tinker with the budget, but not to insert, as they have done, 6,000 plus projects that were not designed, that were not, all the conceptualization and all of that. So you are just throwing them in because you are seeking re-election. You want to pacify and say, as some senators will say, I attracted 20 billion naira worth of projects into my senatorial districts and all of that. That's grandstanding. Because now we are just replicating and wasting resources. Many of these projects, if they are not completed before the exit of this administration, might not be taken over by the incoming administration, which then means we are still wasting very little meager resources that we are complaining is not enough. So I think the President needs to invite the leadership of National Assembly and let them see reason, and they should strike a win-win balance to ensure that we salvage the 2022 budget and make it implementable.
Okay, Dr. Kabir Adamo, how would you describe the President's response to Cyril Stober's question and the action with regards to the budget, assenting to the budget?
Thank you, Claire. Just like Jide mentioned, I think the President showed the magnanimity, leadership, and diplomacy. He has identified the challenge, and unfortunately, this is a challenge that has been long running. The issue of budget padding, which I know the legislature doesn't want to hear, but that is what it is. It's been long running. For me, let's be proactive. Two options, just like Jide said, meeting with the leadership of the National Assembly and come to a compromise agreement that going forward, this is where we stand. And as an option, the legislature plays that oversight function. So I'm hoping that it is during that stage, with its interaction with the MDAs, that it can identify projects so that during the budget development formulation stage, the fact that they've already identified it during the year, that will be inserted in the budget. But when you now wait until the budget is submitted and then you add, and that issue has been controversial, it doesn't speak well. So a meeting to reach a compromise would be one solution. The other one, which I know is out there, is that the judiciary, especially the Supreme Court, should come in and decide for us what is the true position of the Constitution on that issue, so that going forward we stop having this embarrassment, as it were.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Dr. Okunzua, let's hear your views about this. What would you say really about the President's body language when he was speaking yesterday in response to this very issue raised by Cyrus Toba, vis-a-vis, you know, the leadership of the National Assembly's response to questions from reporters on that day, the Appropriation Act was signed. The leadership was in a way trying to say or justify their own position, while the president is saying at least they're trying to strike a balance between critical and constituency projects.
The president hit the bullseye himself by talking about balance. And I couldn't disagree more with our compatriots, Jide and Kabiru, on this matter. We can't speak disparagingly about National Assembly when they are exercising a function ascribed to them by the Constitution. It is National Assembly that approves the budget. So the president couldn't have flung the document back at them. So I believe our National Assembly, as the very cornerstone of our democracy, should begin to assert itself. Well, because the APC controls the presidency and National Assembly, I ordinarily expect you have some kind of backdoor mechanisms for harmonizing some of these areas that can throw up discrepancies. But beyond that, the issue of budget padding and so on is misnomer. It's National Assembly that approves the budget in a democracy, especially the stipulation of our own constituency, of our own constitution. So let's not go there at all. The president has done the right thing by acting as a statesman, but I want to remove the word magnanimity. He was not doing the National Assembly a favor. I expect the senator representing Edo Senatorial District, for instance, to bring home the bacon. I want to see what he's doing, apart from making laws for the general well-being of the country. He has to address the peculiarities of Edo South, for instance, and all other citizens who have senators representing them will expect the same. So as our culture evolves, the president has made a major investment in that by not stimulating a controversy out of this. Discussion should keep going on and on, but that doesn't mean the National Assembly should be lampooned, because they are doing their work. They want to represent their constituencies. It is they who actually know what their peculiarities are. As I said before, the senator representing Edo South Senatorial District, for instance, will know more about Benin City than the president or any person in Aso Rock. So let there be a mechanism for harmonizing all these things. But it is the function of National Assembly to approve the national budget proposed by the presidency, and we cannot detract from that.
Okunzua, now the final response on this matter before we move on to the next excerpt. Mr. Additional, I'm going to ask you on the message, your deductions from the president's reaction to that, what the cuts and the addition, the subtraction and addition from the Senate to the public. From his response to the interview, the body language we read is that, yes, there probably is no love lost between the executive and the judiciary, and the executive. But the feeling we see is much more deeper than being unhappy.
No, I'll say that between the executive and the legislature in this season, there is a lot of collaboration. Collaboration does not translate to being rubber stamp. It does not translate to one controlling the other. No. The legislature we have is still independent, but it collaborates with the executive for the sake of the country and for the sake of our democracy. We saw the last National Assembly in which the legislature was like an opposition to the executive, and they were both of the same party. That was anarchy at the best. But it's not happening now. You have collaboration between the executive and the legislature, and while the liberty and the freedom of one is not compromised for the other. That was what the president displayed when, despite his reservations about certain inclusions in the budget, he signed. And he said, I'm going to ask for virement. He particularly said there were insertions of about 6,000 projects and key projects that should be finished and commissioned this year.
My point is that from his response, it was more than, in fact, he was infuriated by their actions.
Infuriated would not be my choice of word. He had his reservation. He had his reservation. He had his reservation. And you know that the president, he does not hold back his words. When he needs to speak, he speaks.
Can we take the next excerpt here?
Okay, our next excerpt is on the Electoral Amendment Bill. Let's just take a listen.
At the time the National Assembly passed it, the provisions particularly dealing with direct primaries for the political parties, many people said the Buhari we know will sign immediately because he sides with the people who should participate fully in electing their party leaders. But you withheld assent. Can you explain further why you took that decision?
I think there are three ways: direct, indirect, and consensus. So people should be given the option. If they wanted to go direct, let them go direct. If they want consensus, let's have them consensus. The important thing is to show Nigerians, wherever they are, that we respect them, that they are the ones that decide what to do, who to vote, under which party, that we do not allow anybody to raise an army of thugs and intimidate people and make them vote the way he wanted. That's our objective, and we hope Nigerians will appreciate it, that we respect them. We don't allow anybody, no matter how resourceful or influential the person is, in whichever party, to raise an army of thugs and force his candidate on the constituencies.
Jide Ojo, the key point here, the main takeaway here is Nigerians have the right to choose their leaders the way they want to. That is what he really said. What I say?
That's very right, very, very on point. I've asked if I wrote a piece in my column on the motive behind the amendment of Section 87 of the Electoral Act. The British will tell you, if nothing is broken, you don't fix it. The Section 87 already gave leeway to political parties, direct or indirect. And we've been using that for over 10 years now. The last electoral 2010 as amended. So why did that amendment come? Was it deliberate? Was it done out of mischief? The bottom line is that I now have a greater concern about this electoral act with what the civil society organization now discovered to be cross-referencing gap and clerical errors. And they spotted about 10 of it. So if the president has signed, there will be a lot of litigations. And that's why I became a later-day convert that, okay, the president did well by not signing. Because, we should get to a point in our national life that National Assembly should be doing a more thorough work. Cross-referencing error and drafting errors and cross-referencing gap were part of the reason the president withheld assent in 2018.
Okay, Mr. Ojo, thank you. I want us to quickly, conclude this segment so that we take the others. Dr. Kabiru Adamu, are you also a latter-day convert? I've not been following your stream.
No, I've always been supportive of the amendment of the Electoral Act. But just like Jide mentioned, there were definitely errors, administrative errors within the act that was presented to Mr. President. So beyond that, the point made by Mr. President that democracy should also be exercised even at the party level, where he made the point that the party should be allowed to choose. I think that that's absolutely important. Ownership of the process by Nigerians, I think for me, is what is more important, and that is the point that Mr. President mentioned. Time will not allow me to go into what I...
Please, thank you. Thank you for obliging. Let's get to Benin and also get...
Dr. Okunzua, let's hear your take on this very aspect of the president's interview, talking about the Electoral Amendment Bill, which he insisted in that interview as an answer that Nigerians, have the right to choose their own leaders the way they want to, direct, indirect, or the consensus, either ways.
Well, the president was very authoritative, and the reason he disclosed is also very cogent. If you're talking about democracy, you're talking about options, really. If you don't have alternatives, what do you actually choose? So he's correct in that. But the very motive of National Assembly, too, should not be second-guessed. They were actually acting on our experiences since 1999 about party structure, party control, and so on, and all the issues that make democracy work or not to work. So the National Assembly, I believe, also had good intentions, but the president has reasoned that you cannot foreclose options if you are a democracy. So dialogue goes on. Let the National Assembly and the presidency rub minds on the issue and tell us how to proceed. Because the very purpose of that restriction to direct primaries was actually to promote adult universal suffrage, both within the party and at general elections. But since political parties are separate entities unto themselves, they are also free to use their modalities. So both ways, the president has said, established his own point, National Assembly has its own point. Further room for harmonization.
Response, and we expect it will continue with the rest of the excerpt. Let's quickly take excerpt on APC and party politics.
All constituencies are supposed to produce their leadership in our party. What other parties do is their own business. But we want to make sure that our party members understand that they are respected, no matter from polling unit, from ward to polling unit, or polling unit to ward, to local government, to state, and up to Abuja. So those who want to be elected at any level, let them work for it. Nobody is going to appoint anybody. The four-year cycle is constitutional. It cannot be interfered by anybody. So if the party couldn't agree, then the opposition can take over. What did the PDP do? They thought that the opposition cannot come together, but when ACN, ANPP, CPC, Abuja came together, before PDP realized that they were off, they are still off. So they can see it.
Gentlemen, I expect a 30 seconds response. Is it a case of to be forewarned is to be forearmed? Jide Ojo?
Exactly. I think that's what the president is the message the president is trying to pass across. What's worth doing at all is worth doing well. And I think I'm with him on that.
Dr. Kabir, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Zamfara is an example. Rivers State is an example for the ruling party. So yes, to be forewarned is to be fought. In fact, that's where we are.
Oh, that's great. Before we come down to Femi Additional, let's hear from Okunzo.
Well, yes, the president was talking to his party and his party men, and maybe telling Nigerians that whatever dysfunction you might perceive in the APC is not morally in support of it. And talking globally about democracy, our political parties, whether the opposition or the party in government, they have to be well run, they have to be well organized. Otherwise, we will not have alternatives to choose from. That would detract from the quality of our democracy.
All right, Dr. Okunzwa, thank you. And we will quickly, get the opinion of Femi. Do you have any on this?
Yes, I'll just say the president is a straight talker. it involves him, involves his party, involves, like, it's a straight talker.
Okay, the president also said something about infrastructure and COVID-19. If we can have that, and then that will be all that's all that we can take. Okay, I'm told we do not have much time for that. So, Nadabo, I think it's time we appreciate our guest.
Yeah. Femi Adesina, it's our pleasure. Thank you so very much. We really want to leave much earlier, but for the conversation, at least you've stayed back. Thank you so much. It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jide Ojo, it's our pleasure. We've been part of this all this while, at least all through, and then we are going to be part of that. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thanks
Dr.
for having me.
Kabir Adamu, thank you so much for being part of Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Okozwa, we cannot thank you much more, but really, you've been part of this, and we thank you so much, really. Up next on Good Morning Nigeria is Foreign Tidbits.